Ladies and gentlemen, at this time we're going to begin the funeral service of Mary Jane Asher. For those of you joining us online, we welcome you. For those of you who are here, please take a moment to be sure your cell phones have been turned off. Rabbi Michael Siegel from Anshamet Synagogue will be officiating, and at this time he's going to perform the ancient ceremony of Kriya, rending of the cloth. If I could ask the three of you to please rise.
In our tradition, we tear as a sign of mourning. We acknowledge that even at the age of 90, when we lose someone like Mary Jane, that we feel a tear. Something's been torn away from us. A remarkably vital person has been taken from our midst. But our tradition also offers us the wisdom to recite a blessing at this time, so that we never allow ourselves to forget, even for a moment, the blessings that Mary Jane's life created for those who knew and loved her, the blessings that we feel now, and the blessings that will continue into the future. So I'm going to invite those closest in mourning to recite these words of blessing. Baruch atah Adonai, Eloheinu melech haolam, Dayan ha'emet. Praised are you, Lord our God, ruler of the universe, the righteous judge. You can be seated. In the book of Job, we're told the story of a person who suffered in life. Job felt pain. And there were those that came to Job in the midst of his suffering. And they said, Job, life is darkness without light. Life isn't worth living. And Job, in the midst of his pain, looked at this person and said, should I only accept the good in life without the more challenging? And then Job said this, which I'm going to ask everyone to please repeat after me. Adonai Natan, V'Adonai Lakach, Yehi Shem, Adonai Mevorach. God has given, God has taken away. Praise be the name of the Lord. Coming into this room and seeing the beautiful bouquet atop the aron, the casket, carrying Mary Jane, I couldn't help but think of a quotation from John Barry. John Barry, you'll recall, was the author of Peter Pan. And he once said that God gave us memory so that we might have roses in December. Well, it's not December, but it sure feels like it outside. But as we begin this service, I'd like you to look at those roses. I'd like you to focus on your own personal memory of Mary Jane and embrace it as we begin this service of memory. Birth is a beginning. Death is a destination. But life is a journey, a going, a growing from stage to stage, from childhood to maturity and youth to age, from innocence to awareness and ignorance to knowing, from foolishness to discretion, and then perhaps to wisdom, from weakness to strength, or strength to weakness, from health to sickness, and back we pray to health again, from offense to forgiveness, from loneliness to love, from joy to gratitude, from pain to compassion, and grief to understanding, from fear to faith, from defeat to defeat to defeat, until looking backward or ahead, we see that victory lies not at some high place along the way, but in having made the journey stage by stage, a sacred pilgrimage. Birth is a beginning, and death a destination. But life is a journey, a sacred pilgrimage made stage by stage, from birth to death to life everlasting. The 23rd Psalm. Mizmor LeDavid Adonai ro'i lo echsar. Al mei menuchot yancheni b'maglet tzedek leman shemo. Gam ki elech begeit sal mavet lo irara ki ata imadi. Shiftach al mishantecha heime yenachamuni taroch lefanai shulchan neged sorai. Dishanta v'shemen roshi kasivraya. Achto v'chesed yirdefuni kol yemei chayai. V'shavti b'veit Adonai la'orech yamim. I invite you to open your booklets and read with me the inner page, the 23rd Psalm. The Lord is my shepherd, I shall not want. He maketh me to lie down in green pastures. He leadeth me beside the still waters. He restoreth my soul. He leadeth me in paths of righteousness for his name's sake. Yea, though I walk through the valley of the shadow of death, I will fear no evil, for thou art with me. Thy rod and thy staff, they shall comfort me. Thou preparest a table before me in the presence of my enemies. Thou anointest my head with oil, my cup runneth over. Surely goodness and mercy shall follow me all the days of my life, and I shall dwell in the house of the Lord forever. Today we gather to do exactly what King David spoke about. Today we gather to walk through the valley of the shadow. And as we walk with Mary Jane today, we also walk with her memory. And in this room, our family, those who knew Mary Jane the best. And to you, Bob, we pray for your comfort in the days ahead. On this day, we remember David, and we extend our sympathies to Amy, and to you, Daniel, and to you, Susan, to you, Sharon, and to you, Jeffrey, and to grandchildren, to Rachel and her husband Lee, to Katie and her husband Peter, to Elizabeth and her husband Aaron, to Samantha, Ben, Evan, and his wife Miriam, to Melissa and her husband David, to Jack, to Allison, to Carolyn, to Robin, Sean, Ryan, and his wife Laura, to Brandon and his wife Melissa, to Jonathan and Jeremy. We acknowledge the grandchildren as well, to Caitlin, to Jacob, to Madeline, Nathan, April, Grayson, Emil, Talia, Asher, Millie, and Addison. To each of you, we pray that you will come to know your grandmother and your great-grandmother through memory, and cherish that memory just as we cherish those beautiful roses on top of the casket. I want to add to the list of family members 3 people who have been like family. Thinking of Alma and Star and Rosie, who have treated Mary Jane with love and care, maintained her dignity throughout in ways that were remarkably loving. I know how much the family appreciates what you have done for them. We thank you on this day and pray for your comfort as well. Mary Jane had the Hebrew name Miriam. And in our tradition, we say, Kashem Kainhu. As a person's name is, so are they. In other words, our names reflect something about us. And during the course of our lives, we become our names. And Miriam, the sister of Moses, was a fascinating figure in the Bible. She was strong. She was a presence. She was a force of nature. I'm not sure if you can see where I'm going here, but Mary Jane was such a person. And Miriam is known for many reasons, but most of all, for her song. When the sea split and the children of Israel looked out and saw the remains of the Egyptian army and realized that they had been redeemed, they broke into a song, and the Torah records that it was Miriam who led them in song, who instilled a sense of joy and wonder and uplifted the words through music and her tambourine. A song that we continue to sing to this very day. Not a tambourine, but a piano and music. The kind of music that goes beyond the love of music, but music that emanates from your soul. The music that was part of her, and that music and love of music, love of the arts that she passed down to her family. Just as Miriam did, sharing that song that we continue to sing in synagogue even this morning. The song continued long after Miriam. But there's something else you should know about Miriam. It's a legend. Say that wherever Miriam went, there was a well. And as the children of Israel wandered through the desert, wherever they would encamp, a well would magically appear. It would just be there. And that well sustained the people. And the Torah goes on, or the rabbis go on to say that when the Torah records Miriam dying, the next thing that happens in the Torah is that the people don't have water. And the rabbis surmise from that the well disappeared. I think that Mary Jane had her own well. And I thought about that when I left their home on Friday. I remember walking into the room. Mary Jane, who had passed, was lying there in her bed. And there was Bob, there was Sharon, there was Daniel, talking, sharing memories. I think Daniel used the term omnipresent. She was there. Those three people had been sustained in some way by the well of this Miriam. They spoke of her love, their love of arts, of the arts. They spoke of what was going to be passed down from one generation to the next. Sharon spoke of herself as a dancer at one point in her life. Daniel of having perfect pitch. And that sense that you can never get that song out of your head, just as Mary Jane did. And Bob, you spoke of a marriage that within a month would total 70 years. A true lifetime together. And that remarkable partnership. Each of you had your own separate memories of Mary Jane. And the one thing that everyone agreed upon is that she was complicated. What I want to suggest to you on this day, and as you listen to the remembrances that we're going to hear, I want you to imagine that the well that accompanied Miriam so long ago actually didn't end. The people just needed to be able to dig their own wells in her memory. So too here, the well, the example, the lessons that Mary Jane taught, they will continue from generation to generation, and I believe they will continue to sustain this family as they go forward. And so it is our honor today, or I should say Mary Jane's honor, to hear from family members today, to remember her. We're going to begin with Bob, and then I'll call on Daniel and Sharon. And then we're going to look to grandchildren, to Ryan, to Melissa, and finally Dan. Bob?
Thank you, Rabbi Siegel, for your most appropriate and thoughtful remarks. In a brief moment, you captured Mary Jane. Dear family, you know, with a group like this, I'm accustomed to standing up here and talking. This is a sad day in all of our lives, and yet I want to look at this as a celebration, and I'm going to use the term grandma because most of you who are here are grandchildren, a celebration of grandma's life. When Rabbi Siegel said she was complicated, he referred to a conversation that we had, Dan Shern and I, and I guess I'd say, without warning, he said, "What one word would you characterize Mary Jane?" And he quoted Dan. He asked me first, and I said, honest. And then I realized that wasn't enough. And I've been thinking about that. I added some other characteristics, and I came up with a new word, iceberg. We all know icebergs show above the ocean, but what's under the surface of the ocean is so much bigger, so much stronger. That was Grandma. Grandma, by nature, was not demonstrative. She didn't often show her emotions, but they were there. You can believe that they were there. Being with Rabbi Siegel and Dan and Sharon made me also think about my relationship with Grandma. I said honest, and that's a true description. I could also say straightforward. I could also say she was there when I needed her, just as I was there when she needed me. We were there for each other. We were together. We were partners. I guess I could speak for a very long time, because 69 years is not such a short time, and having had the pleasure of some of you coming over to the house, we talked about some of the things. But I want to just tell you perhaps one thing. I don't know if I've told you, if I haven't. For most of the years of our marriage, every night before we went to bed, Grandma and I would stand at the foot of the bed, put our arms around each other, and tell each other we loved each other. Because we knew no matter what happened during the day, the big picture was always, in the end, there was our love. And that remains. That's there today. I got Grandma to speak in public one time. I couldn't believe I pulled it off, frankly. But I got her to speak in public one time. I've told many of you this past week that as far as the Israel Arts and Science Academy, which is a 32-year labor of love, wasn't my idea. It was hers and our Israeli partner, Rafi Amram. I was along for the ride. I was the enabler. And she and Rafi came up with the idea. And it makes me think how much she was responsible for the directions of our lives together. You've all seen a book called Paths Taken. And so many of the different paths that we've taken were initiated by Grandma. Not me. I was up front, but she initiated them. She started. And the thing, she went to a place called Camp Interlaken in Interlaken, Michigan. It's a well-known school for the performing arts. And she went there for 2 years in her teenage years, and it made a real impression on her. It made the things that it really directed many of the things we did, because the first things we did were music. And that came as a result of her. She was the source of great strength. She never raised her voice. She never hollered. But there was a strength of character that you can only say if you experienced it. This was a genuine, real person. I'm going to stop now.
Yeah, to keep a spot. Do you want to stand up or you want to stay there? You ready? Yeah. You can just listen. So, something obviously very deep and traumatic occurs, and I'm feeling a little overwhelmed. And Dad and Sharon and I and Rabbi are sitting around discussing this and talking about it, and I'm reaching to make some sense out of this. And I want to acknowledge that in about 1 minute, you managed to impart some wisdom that gave me grounding and an ability to move forward with it, so thank you for that. It's no big secret that Grandma was sometimes a little difficult to handle or to deal with or to interact with, but thankfully, that's only a part of this story, which is probably part of most stories. And what the rabbi said to me or to us was trying to make sense out of your relationship with your mother or with anyone is kind of like having a suitcase full of memories and other things. And there's dark things in that suitcase, there are light things in that suitcase, there's other stuff in there. But what we have the ability to do is to choose what we're going to hold at any point in time. You can't always choose it. Sometimes stuff pops out of the suitcase and you're going to have to pick it up and deal with it. But all of a sudden, with the idea that I'm going to choose now, and I started thinking about Mom and all the various dark and light and deep things that occurred during our lifetime. And it went from being overwhelming and depressing and turned bittersweet and interesting and actually a little bit joyful. Now, I know it's not that simple, of course, but today it is. So inside my suitcase, there's some crying and some heavy-duty emotions and some darkness, and there's snapshots of playing golf. She took me out golfing a few times, and the W Ranch, riding horses, and dinner, and things like that. But there's another item in this box which you've already referred to that I want to talk about, because there's a little treasure chest in there that's much bigger on the inside than it is on the outside, and you open it up, and inside that chest is music. And there's all kinds of music in there. And there's always music, Mom said, playing in her head. There's pretty much always music playing in my head. And all of my children, every one of you, at one point or another, have looked kind of accusingly at me and said, I've got a song stuck in my head. And I frequently have songs stuck in my head, to which I'd like to now address all of you at once and say, you're welcome, and don't forget to thank Grandma for that, because she gave it to me as her mother, I believe, gave it to her, as to one of her parents, I imagine, gave, or maybe both, I don't know, and so on. And to be perfectly honest, without music playing in my head, I can't imagine how difficult life would be. So when you guys come to us with various issues, problems, I know that you get world-class nurturing and care from your mother. I hope you get love and support and wisdom, or some intelligence anyway, from both of us. But for me, as you all know, you frequently get a line from a song, which a lot of times you roll your eyes at. Every now and then might mean something. And I hope sometimes lightens whatever the heaviness of the particular issue du jour is. Remind me, another one popped in my head, Sam. I got one for you later. So Sharon, not only did she give us this gift, but Sharon mentioned that she used to crawl under the piano while Mom was playing, and I used to sit on the stairs and listen while Mom was playing. So not only did she give us the gift of the ability to hear music, but she also filled us with music. And so today, and unfortunately I don't have great control over the actual radio. The music just plays, and I can't really dial in what I want. But today I have some Beethoven playing and some Foo Fighters and Elton John, and I'm sure you guys all know what Elton John song it is today. I want to say goodbye for now to Mom, and thanks for the tunes. What about you?
Well, first I want to acknowledge it's just amazing to have everybody here. And I wanted to acknowledge Sean and Robin. Robin isn't here because she's not well. And Sean isn't here because he's far, far away in the land that Muma was most at home at in Israel. And that she loved, I know she loved you. I know, Robin, you were her Robbie Dobbs. And I know she loved you too, Sean. So I think that the biggest gift for me was Mom's love of arts. And though there wasn't a lot of closeness between us, that was something that was always there, both above the water and below the water, was her artistic nature. And thank God for that, because I wasn't going to be an intellect, and having this guy as someone just 10 and a half months older than me, people didn't really know I existed. So a lot of the happiness that I got growing up was to be able to express myself dancing and just with the love of arts that I had. And I just want to share just a little funny story. It is true, Mom never raised her voice, never yelled. Didn't mean she wasn't unhappy with a situation. But she really did have a good sense of humor. And one time, my boyfriend snuck in, threw stones at the window on the balcony, climbed up, came in the balcony, and slept in my room. And Mom came to the door in the morning, and he scrambled to the floor and put an Afghan over himself. And she came in the room, and for whatever reason, she sat on the floor, on the Afghan, on my boyfriend. And she went, woo! And all she did was get up and laugh and said, I'm not going to tell your father. So,
Bill Towner?
yes, I'm grateful for that. So it is true that memories, even a second after something happens, it's a memory, right? So we all have great memories, and I'm sure, something the rabbi said that was really helpful to me was that he had a complicated relationship with his father, and what he did to get through the mourning period was have a journal and write in the journal, and it started with something each time. This is what happened today, and he would think of a memory, good, bad, whatever, and write it down, and it provided a bridge between, him and his father. It grew a bridge, and that's the way I'm going to think about it too. I'm just glad everybody's here, and I'm glad you guys are here too. Okay?
It's okay with me.
When I listed the grandchildren who were speaking, the list wasn't complete, and I apologize for that. So it's Ryan, Melissa, Ben, and Dan.
Well, I'll first start to say that I was a little nervous to come up here and talk, but once I got into this room and I see who's here, it's not difficult to talk to all of you because you're all family, and it's so good to see all of you. Hearing Grandpa's, before I get into what I actually prepared, I'm hearing what Grandpa had to say about Grandma was great to hear, and I know that the relationship I have with my wife is something that I built around watching you with yours. It's something that I hold very dear to my heart. And the last 12 years of having children and coming to visit you guys and visit, it's like the greatest thing we get to do is go downtown and see Grandpa and Grandma. So we're definitely going to miss Grandma not being part of those visits, but we'll still have you around, which is great. Grandma definitely had a good sense of humor, as we've talked about, and I know there's times where I would call and I would call, and if Grandma answered the phone, well, I'd tell Grandma everything I was going to say that day. If Grandpa answered the phone, I'd tell Grandpa everything I was going to tell him that day. And I remember those days I think about as doing that. It's just, I love those conversations I could have with her. I could have different conversations with her than I had with Grandpa, and her sense of humor brought those conversations to a different level that I loved. So my story today is actually meant to bring laughs, so that's a good thing, right? Obviously, we all know who I am, so I don't need to say my name, as I actually put the first thing as introducing myself, so that's kind of silly. But myself and Brandon are the oldest grandchildren of Mary Jane Asher. I was born first, but technically, we won't get into that. Let's just move on and not focus on that. But I want to tell you a story about all the grandchildren of Mary Jane Asher. I'm not going to tell you how many there are right now, although we all know how many there are, because that would definitely ruin the story. But let's count together. I also am not sure I'll get all the years right, but I'm going to give it my best, okay? It all started in 1981. I know that to be true, when Mary Jane's son David brought me and my twin brother Brandon into the world. Soon thereafter, and we'll just say a few years later, Dan and Susan joined the ranks as parents, and Rachel joined us. Not to be outdone, and feeling very FOMO, which is fear of missing out. Y'all probably know that. Sharon and Jeff decided to join the fun, and Evan was brought into the world. So then there were 4 grandchildren at that point. Of course, at this point, David had 2 children. Danny and Susan and Sharon and Jeff only had 1, and they were all feeling very FOMO. So they had to catch up. So Susan had Katie, and Sharon had Melissa, and the score was all tied up at 2 apiece. Things were looking really good. Everyone was feeling like really comfortable. Okay, we all got the same amount of kids. This is good. So to shake things up, Danny and Susan had to have Beth, and instantly there was a need for Sharon to catch up, and I think Jack was born a short period after that. So at this point, there were 8 grandkids. The parents and grandparents were feeling very outnumbered because now at our family gatherings, there were more grandkids than parents. There'd be 7 of them at the parties typically, and 8 of us to run around. So we were aptly dubbed Muma's Army. And don't worry, the army was not done growing yet. Next up, as the 9th grandkid, Sharon and Jeff had Allison, and a short year or 2 later, Caroline as the 10th. I hope I'm in the right order, and all of you are going to call me out later if I'm not. No, I had Jack. He was 8, number 8, Muma's Army. It's good. I know it's hard. I had to call people and be like, you know who you are when I had to call you. Like, dude, who was first? This was difficult. So Danny and Susan decided it would be a good idea to have another, and Samantha was born making 11, I think. Sharon and Jeff, a few years later, brought us Robin, and for any of you losing count, we're now at 12 grandkids. And this is when everyone decided it was time to take a little break from the whole baby-making thing. And the year was 1996. After about 5 years of no births in the family, David was like, nah, I'm going to go get married again and have another kid. And Jonathan was born. And we all know when Jonathan was born, y'all can guess what happened next. The FOMO started to set in again. Sharon and Jeff and Danny and Susan immediately thought it was a good idea to have another child. And Sean was born, followed not too long after by Ben. Am I in the right order? I hope. Okay, so we're at 15 grandkids. The score, if you were keeping track, was 3 to 5 to 7. Amy and David had some serious FOMO and had Jeremy. And Jeremy graced us with his presence. Where's Jeremy? There he is. And now we're at 16 grandchildren. There was no more FOMO. The baby-making phase of this generation was complete. I hope. There could be another, right? Maybe? No. We're done, right? And today I'm 40 years old, and the youngest, Jeremy, is 17, and everyone in between, and all of our ages, I'm not even going to list that out, but I would be remiss to also mention all the great-grandchildren that we are now have in our family. After 5 short years after Jeremy was born, my wife and I had some serious FOMO, and we decided to start having children. And my 4 children, Caitlin, Jacob, Madeline, and Nathan, the first 4 grandchildren of Mary Jane, we all call her Gigi, I believe. And the rest of my cousins now at this point, seeing me with 4 children, were like, now we're going to start getting to the madness here. So we now have, and there's a lot of them, Talia, Addison, Millie J, April, Grayson, Emil, and the newest member named Asher, which makes 11 great-grandchildren, and there's one more coming to be determined from one of my cousins. There's another one out there? Who else? Oh my God, you're pregnant too. See, guys, I mean, what am I supposed to do here? 2 more grandchildren. So all in all, I'll get this number right. 29 of us are all thankful to have had Mary Jane Asher in our lives for as long as we have. I love you very much, Grandma. And that's the story of all of us. I hope you enjoyed it. I love all of you very much.
I also put introduction ? At the beginning, but that seems unnecessary. It's good to see everybody here. I lived in Israel from 2011 to 2013, and I was very lucky to spend a lot of special time with both my grandparents, and particularly a lot of one-on-one time with my grandmother, who us Dreyfus kids refer to as Muma, thanks to my older brother Evan. The first year I was living in a more southern part of Israel, so I would go down to visit them every few weeks. But later on, in about April 2012, I decided to move to Jerusalem, which is where Muma and Pupa resided. And Muma was so excited about my move, she made the few-hour trek down to Beersheba, where I was in the south, and picked me and all my belongings up, and we drove back together to Jerusalem. Muma had such a deep, beautiful love for the state of Israel, and particularly Jerusalem. And I immediately understood why. We really bonded over our shared love for the beautiful city. We went on regular outings to our favorite outdoor mall, Mamila, and we would shmai dry, which is a term she taught me early on in life. We went on many lunch dates. We called ourselves the ladies who lunch. Pupa, the glamorous, much-loved name that Evan gave to Grandpa, was often busy with various meetings throughout the day, which really gave Muma and I the opportunity to become buddies. Muma had such a sense of pride when it came to Jerusalem, Israel in general, but Jerusalem really had her heart. She was eager for any chance to show any part of it to me, whether it was going to a market or a restaurant. Really, anywhere, she was excited to tell me everything that she knew about it. I got to spend a lot of time with Muma and her best friend, Yeti, and it was just me and the ladies. It was a trip, and it was special to see their friendship. It was a special friendship between the two of them. I truly feel I got to see a different side of Muma in Israel. There was such a sense of ease about her when she was there, and it was so special to be a part of that and to see her there and spend so much time with her there in the place that she loved the most. Another really special opportunity I had while in Jerusalem was working at IASA, the Israel Arts and Sciences Academy, which my grandparents founded. I did some secretarial work and outreach for their excellence programs and a lot of translating. And Muma was always so impressed with my Hebrew language, which I will humbly admit I'm quite fluent, and she was so proud of that, and that always felt good to me. She took any opportunity she had to use a Hebrew word or a saying whenever she could. She even had on her laptop an overlay on the keyboard that had all the corresponding Hebrew letters. She was trying to learn how to type, which it was very difficult to type in Hebrew, but she was always working on it. She really loved the language. Muma and Pupa worked so hard to build and maintain IASA. It's such a wonderful institution, and one of the many ways they came together to support Israel. They are truly a dynamic duo. The love, loyalty, and respect between the two of them was so evident and truly admirable, and I really feel so lucky to have gotten to witness that on such a personal level. During the times they were back in Chicago, Muma and I communicated through Skype, and through email, and She wrote very lengthy, thoughtful emails. I'd like to share one here today, as I think it really gives you a different glimpse into her character. So it was subject, hello, goodbye, hello. So, it is now going on high noon. I'm completely ready to go. Have been to the beauty parlor, and I'm so happy with my hair because when he does it, it lasts from anywhere from 4 days to a week, by which time I'm frantic to wash it. Pupa has just ducked out for a short visit to his office. When he comes back, he will have lunch. We will sit and stare at each other for the next hour and a half. Then we go to the airport and sit around there for an hour and a half. Then we board the plane for New York, actually for New Jersey, and stare at each other for about 1.45 hours. Land in New Jersey and sit around for another 2 hours, and then on to the Holy Land. Oh, I must tell you a very funny, true story. I still giggle when I think about it. We have a rather new neighbor, senior couple on our floor. Nice Jewish people. We bump into him frequently as they adopted a rescued dog about 3 months ago. It is apparent that this sweet animal was tortured by whoever had him before. Our neighbor has been working quite hard to help him lose his truly overwhelming fear of humans. Every time I see him with the dog, I stop and chat and let the dog sniff my hands as much as he wants. When he calms, I scratch and pet him and talk to him, parentheses the dog, for a few minutes. He came to the elevator yesterday as we were waiting for it on our floor. He greeted us with the following story. He was coming into the building when he heard our doorman, Mike, talking to another new resident of the building. Mike said, quote, "There are very many nice people living in the building." He noticed my neighbor and continued, "There are 2 couples on the 40th floor who are especially nice. Mr. Gross," which was their new neighbor, he said, indicating that Mr. Gross was my neighbor, "and Mr. and Mrs. Asher. Mr. Asher is very special. He is the president of the Jewish people." Well, that's the story. We have no idea what Mike meant or what he heard where. We are just tickled by the story. Gotta pack up the computer now. Kisses to, she wrote DOMD, which stood for Daughter of My Daughter, signed MOYM, Mother of Your Mother. She loved that story. We all loved that story. In fact, we even referred to Grandpa as the Prez for quite a while after that. I'm very grateful for the time I got to spend with my grandparents in Israel, and especially for the unique bond I was able to build with Muma, and I will forever carry those memories in my heart.
It's weird how I can be still nervous, ready to speak in front of a room of just my family. My dad always tells me that I should take public speaking courses, and this should be as easy as it is, but it's still hard. Death's a weird thing for everyone. What I found is the hardest thing is not what's happening to the person who's dying, but happens to everybody around them. I'm one of the youngest grandchildren, so a lot of the memories I have of Grandma are from when I'm a lot younger. I remember my first real experience with death was when my Uncle David died, and I was at that age I still didn't really understand what was happening. I just didn't really understand what was going on. And I remember what kind of put it in perspective for me was when my mom was really upset. She was crying in the kitchen, and she said, "I can't even imagine how Jonathan and Jeremy feel right now." And that's what kind of got to me and put it into perspective to me. I can't imagine how I would respond if that happened to me. The thing that was different about Uncle David is that it was very abrupt. and nobody saw anything coming. But with Grandma, it's just been dragged out over a long period of time, so you just kind of see parts of her go very slowly, which is really hard. And I remember going to visit Grandma, and I distinctly remember one time I walked in, and Grandma looks at me, and she goes, "I know who that is." And I could tell in her eyes that she didn't entirely remember me, but it's hard to see Grandma like that. But the hardest part for me was to see, I can't even describe the emotion, but however Grandpa feels, and Dad and everybody else who's there who has more experience of Grandma than I do. But I was in class when Dad called me to let me know that she passed. It was weird because, I mean, I knew why he was calling me, but when I had left class and I picked up the phone, the first thing that came to my head was one of my memories of Grandma when I was a lot younger. And I don't exactly remember what it was, but I remember when me, Jonathan, Jeremy, and Sean would all play around when we would go to Water Tower Place to see you guys. And I don't exactly remember what Grandma said, but she was kind of yelling at us to be careful because we were going to get hurt doing something. And it's not the fact that she was yelling at us, but I remember the memory was just light and pleasant and warm. So I just say we love you, Grandma, and that everyone can remember you in the best way that they can. So thanks.
I don't know a grandchild Dan, but people frequently make fun of me for being a mini Dan, so I'll take that as my cue that I'm supposed to sing something and you all have to listen to it. So, and I apologize, I'm gonna have to read the lyrics because I don't know them off the top of my head. But the song that's been playing ever since Friday around 9 o'clock in the morning is I'll Be Seeing You by Billie Holiday. And I'm sorry, Grandma, because I'm pretty sure Billie Holiday wasn't your favorite. So, but okay. I'll be seeing you in all the old familiar places that this heart of mine embraces all day through. In that small cafe, the park across the way, the children's carousel, the chestnut tree, the wishing well. I'll be seeing you in every lovely summer's day, in everything that's right and gay. I'll always think of you that way. I'll find you in the morning sun, and when the night is new, I'll be looking at the moon, but I'll be seeing you. Thank you for that, Grandma.
God gave us memories so that we might have roses in December. So thank you, Bob and Dan and Sharon, for the roses that we were able to look at, to Ryan, to Melissa, Ben and Dan. Thank you for the memories, for the song. I would not think, actually, to add to any of the beautiful words that were said. So instead, I'm going to offer a lesson from the Torah that comes from this week's Parsha in Mary Jane's memory and Bob. We are in the part of Exodus when we are building the tabernacle. And in order to build this structure, every Israelite had to give something. Bob, you'll appreciate the fact that this was the very first Jewish fundraiser. And every Israelite had to bring a half shekel. And as a result, the tabernacle, this portable sanctuary, was built. And the rabbis asked this question: why not give a whole shekel? Why a half? And their answer has something to say to us today. Because a half shekel is a reminder to every person that they're not whole unless they're connected to someone else. That each of us are a half shekel in search of that other half. And if we're lucky, we find that person. And when Bob's uncle spotted Mary Jane on the beach one day, he thought about Bob. And they met, and these two half shekels became one. And Bob proposed to Mary Jane, but first had to ask Jack, Mary Jane's husband, father, for permission. And being an accountant, Bob had his own definition of romantic language. Now imagine being Jack and having this young suitor come and sit down with you and say, "You have a daughter, you have a debit that I see as an asset. So I'd like you to allow me to marry her." There were probably more romantic ways to speak. Somehow, some way, Jack said yes. Of course, truth be told, he really couldn't say no, because he must have seen in his daughter's eyes that she had met her Besherta, the one that she was meant to be with, just as Bob recognized that. And as Bob told me, they were partners in life. They were each other's best friend. They were one together. When they stood under the chuppah, the liturgy refers to the bride and groom as Re'im Ha'ahuvim, loving friends. Not lovers alone, not friends alone, but that mystical union of having the person who you feel passion for also be the person who can tell you not only what you want to hear, but also tell you what you need to hear. Bob and Mary Jane shared that. And as we've learned, they were also dugmaot. They were symbols. They represented, they were examples of what a marriage could be. Not perfection, but partnership. Two half shekels that became one. And I want to suggest to you that they made each other better. They represented different strengths. And together they made one beautiful whole. And through the school in Israel, which was Mary Jane's idea, but they partnered to create something remarkable. The family that Bob and Mary Jane created doesn't just exist in this room and those online, but they have children who have gone to that school, and I think Mary Jane saw them as offspring. People who received a remarkable education, whose lives were changed because of that school. The people of Israel had to contribute a half shekel, and the result was the tabernacle, which became the temple. And when the temple was destroyed, our rabbis teach us that we have the potential to build a mikdash ma'at, a miniature tabernacle in our homes. And that's what Mary Jane and Bob did, both here in Chicago, in Palm Springs, in Jerusalem. They created that home. And this family is better for it. This world is better for it as well. So I close with these words. The Baal Shem Tov, the founder of modern Hasidism, once taught that there are 3 ways to mourn for a person. You can mourn in silence. You can mourn in tears. You can mourn in song. Mary Jane suffered with an unforgiving illness that took away so much from her. There have been moments of silence. There have been tears along the way. So much so that death came as a blessing in its own way. So I bid you to follow the teaching of the Baal Shem Tov, and when you remember her, to mourn in song, remembering the extraordinary song of Mary Jane, Miriam, Bat Yaakov, V'chana. We rise now for the memorial prayer. El male rachamim, shochen bamromim, hamse menucha nechona, tachat kanfei ashchina, b'mahalot kedoshim atorim, kazarakia mazirim, et nishmat Miriam bat Yaakov v'chana, shalcha lolama, began eden tehei menuchata, Ana bal rachamim asireh b'setek amfechel olami, v'titzor b'shmata, Adonai onachalata, v'tanuach b'shalom al mishkava, v'nomar amen. God, you are exalted and full of compassion. We pray that you take the beloved soul of his wife, mother, grandmother, great-grandmother, builder, under the wings of your divine presence. We ask you to remember the many worthy and good deeds that Mary Jane Asher performed in the land of the living. And we pray that her soul will be bound up in the bond of eternal life. And may she rest b'shalom. May she rest in peace. And may her song continue on. And to that we can all say, Amen.
Ladies and gentlemen, the interment service will continue at Memorial Park Cemetery, located at 9900 Grosse Pointe Road here in Skokie. For those of you who will be driving to the cemetery, the procession will be forming in our parking lot. Please obtain an orange safety funeral sticker to place on the right-hand side of your windshield. Have your bright lights on at all times. For additional measures of safety, use your horn liberally as you're going through the intersections. Please do not speak or text on your cellular phone while driving to the cemetery. Memorial contributions to the Israel Arts and Science Academy in Yerushalayim. That information is all on the service folder. At this time, I invite everyone to please rise, and all the grandchildren, spouses, great-grandchildren, if you want to follow her casket out to the hearse, that would be nice, and the family can just go to the family room. For those of you who are online, thank you for joining us. This concludes the online portion.
I just want to mention one thing, and that when we get to the cemetery, it's very cold outside. So what we're going to do is we're going to take the casket to the burial site. We're going to lower the casket immediately and place the vault lid on. I'm going to begin the service after that. I've asked Bob to stay in the car until I signal for him to come over. Others who may want to stay in the car until that part of the service begins may do so. The service itself will be very short.
If everyone wants to follow, please. Grandchildren,